Hey guys, welcome back to the read-along of the Cyborg Tinkerer by Meg LaTorre. I'm Kat, and I will try to squeeze 4 chapters into this video, because, wow, I'm finally past the halfway point of this book, and maybe one day soon we'll even finish it. Chapter 19 begins with Gwen following Bastion, who just rode off into the sunset on the dragon. Against his will, kind of, and certainly against the dragon's will, but he's off on Dragonback and Gwen is off to follow him. But before she goes, she tells Abrakan and his buddy Faniel, because she has to leave a hurt Rora and an unconscious Mazana behind. If those 2 women aren't alive when I return, Gwen pointed at where Rora and Mazana lay on the cave floor behind her, so help me, I will kill you myself and make it look like an accident. Have I made myself clear? Abrakan's eyes swept the length of her, implicitly. Why would he give a shit? Abrakan has made it clear that he considers himself an enemy of Rora's, and he's pissed at Gwen for, denying him what he thinks he's entitled to. And why would he care? I don't see why he would take Gwen's threat seriously at all. The only option I see is that he's concerned, well, okay, if I piss her off more, then she might not repair anything if I have issues with my implants. Because I think for the moment Gwen would do it to the best of her capabilities anyway, regardless of how much she dislikes this guy. Anyway, Gwen sets off on her skimmer, and Bastion and her fight the dragon mid-air, and they manage to put some tranquilizer into the poor thing. Except they do this mid-air, and then Dragon and Bastion fall out of the sky. Well planned as always. But yeah, I guess leading the dragon closer to the ground before, trying to knock him out was too difficult, even though he was coming after Gwen and snapping at her, so she could have just flown closer to the ground and maybe Bastion wouldn't have fallen as far. And the dragon. As always, I'm more concerned about the dragon than about these 2 guys, but whatever. We get a glimpse of romance that I was not prepared for, nor did I need it. Kicking the engine off, she leaped down and kneeled before the acrobat. Are you okay? I'm fine now that you're here, Rora managed a small smile. Yeah, sure. Gwen appearing makes everything better. She asks a very viable question though. What were you thinking, trying to distract the dragon like that? What was anybody thinking in this competition? So Gwen checks on Rora and they talk for a little bit, and then they have their first kiss. Never mind the fact that Mazana is still knocked unconscious, lying next to her. It's like, no, we have to start making out now. This is far more important. Unbelievable. I'm just trying to imagine this. They have to explain this to Arcu, Mazana's partner, at some point. Yeah, we could have saved, but we were too distracted making out. It's yeah, good stuff. And then as a reward for not killing Mazana or Rora while they were left alone with them, Gwen just leaves Abrakan and Faniel behind. It's yeah, I will take these 2 on my skimmer, but you guys can go screw yourselves. It's not my problem. It's yeah, wow. This is precisely how you do not turn your enemies into potential allies. I mean, Abrakan is probably... You can probably scratch him off that list anyway, but I had hope for Faniel because he showed some decency in that first competition towards Rora. And, maybe not pissing absolutely everybody off might work in your favor from time to time, Gwen, but, yeah, what do I know? Actually, what do I know about life and death competitions? Nothing, because, I don't live in this universe. Then the logic here is astounding again. The truth of the matter was, Rora and Mazana were in no shape to bring the dragon back themselves, and Gwen and Bastion couldn't be seen helping them for their own safety and for the safety of the performers. There was no saying what the mistress would do to those who had assistance in winning the competition. Hasn't everybody seen you already? Literally every performer who is still alive must have noticed that you came flying in with your skimmer and that it was freaking Bastion sitting on Dragonback when you took the thing out. I think that ship has sailed, Gwen. Of course, Abrakan is not just gonna step back and let this win go to somebody else, so Gwen has to force his hand by threatening to drop the last of the tranquilizer. But, because he likes winning too much, or rather, I guess he's attached to his implants, Gwen manages to convince him that a shared victory is the way to go. Because quite a few performers already died on the mountaintop, Gwen manages to convince the others, well, some of the guys who are not here right this second need to lose as well then. So you can all shut up and not mention my involvement. It's like, yeah, cool, well, tough luck for the people who are not there to join in this victory. And then Gwen's and Bastion's return to the city is very quick. You only get like a couple of lines. For the second time, they climbed up the rope in the garden to Bastion's rooms. They bathed and stashed their things before leaving his room to an escort of watchmen. Suddenly the watchmen are back. They must have been standing outside Bastion's door for like 2 days at this point, just wondering why nobody ever came out, or, you know. Maybe they are robots. Not even cyborgs, but straight up robots, because if they've just been standing there for 2 days, then there's clearly something wrong here. And nobody in all of this cares about animal welfare at all. Like at the end of the chapter, Gwen is worried about, oh god, I have to cut more implants out now, oh, I want to puke. And I'm just over here like, yeah, but what is happening to the poor dragon now? I'm more concerned about the dragon that is now, you know, within reach of the mistress. Clearly the mistress has plans for the dragon, because she speaks to Gwen and Bastion before the surgeries. If you ever want to return to the fold, we could use an experienced hand with the dragon. It will take some time to make sure it's docile. So she's asking Bastion whether he wants to return to the fold, but the man never left. He is still working for you. He is on your show management team. He hasn't been anywhere else in years. Like, how does he return to the fold? I don't understand. And Gwen does not know when to keep her mouth shut. Good luck potty training the dragon, Gwen said, somehow finding her voice. Bastion is done being whipped like one of your beasts. After the day's events, she'd lost whatever tact she might have had. Gwen, you never had any tact in the first place, I'm sorry to say. And yeah, this is not how you speak to your boss. Because it turns out Celeste had noticed that they were not where they were supposed to be, and that they somehow did something to help the performers. So the watchmen start beating up Gwen, and Bastion folds and tells the mistress that he took Gwen to the library so she could actually be of more use in the surgeries and as a tinkerer. Apparently that's good enough to satisfy the mistress at the moment, because she asks no further questions. Gwen gets punched a couple more times, and then it's off to the surgeries, which I also have to question. I mean, you're trying to make a point, but okay, I mean, she's obviously being a bitch and, you know, unnecessarily violent and whatnot, but is it really helpful to beat up your one surgeon right before you send her to like a whole evening and night of surgeries? I still think the mistress actually wants those parts, or at least, you know, that's what has been implied all this time. So, you know, beating up your one surgeon, unless you want to do it yourself, seems counterproductive. I think we ended up with the wrong word in this one instance. So Gwen is back cutting implants out of people. Blood soaked her tunic and pants, running into her boots until she left scarlet footprints. You're going in there barefoot because otherwise it should be boot prints? And also just because I'm more used to British English, I suppose, but I just ran pants and I was like, you're doing this in your underwear? No, this is American English. It's trousers, all right, okay. And one of her patients calls Gwen Grim Reaper. But it's important, it's with 2M, just like her last name, because you could totally tell the difference in speech, whether it's Grim with 1M or with 2M. But that's Gwen's new nickname now, Grim Reaper. And she takes this very personally, despite the fact that it makes perfect sense for people to be upset at her as well. In chapter 20, you get a bit of an insight into just how hard Gwen takes those surgeries, because she's sitting in the bathtub crying for a little bit. But then you get a very weird mood swing. Again, a knock sounded at the door. Swallowing back tears, she finished washing, wrapped her hair in a towel, and hopped out of the tub. Is hopping really the word you want to use here? Lifted herself out of the tub, or like, you know, anything that is slow or heavy in movement rather than hopped out of the tub. Gwen takes her sweet time getting to the door to let Roar in. Roar shows a lot of sympathy for Gwen, and for how hard Gwen is taking all of this. And we get some redundant information again. The acrobat nodded. Celeste had the watchman unlock everyone's rooms the morning of the second competition. Trust me, I know. Yes, that was yesterday. That is literally only yesterday that the watchman opened your door to drag you out for the second competition. Like, Gwen knows this happened. Gwen and Roar have a heart-to-heart about how bad Gwen feels and how shitty the situation as a whole is. And Gwen tells you that she's killed people before, and I'm just thinking like, yeah, of course not the first time you killed somebody. You were talking about space pirates before, but that's an entirely different situation, which is something she points out a little later herself. Gwen has reached a point where she can't remember the names of her parents. And we get this bit. Helpless rage splintered through her as more of her memories were lost, slipping from her grasp like oil between her fingers. Wouldn't oil stick to skin though? I mean, obviously not all of it, but there's a reason it's annoying to wash off your hands. I don't know, I feel like this is the wrong liquid to go with this imagery, but okay. We moved on to the real romantic bit because, you know, after the kiss that couldn't have happened at a worse time with Roar's unconscious friend next to them, we now get this. Roar looked up and their gazes locked. The first time I saw you, something inside me changed. Oh, yeah, of course, one look is all it takes to know this is the right person for you, because that never goes wrong. Sure. Gwen worries a little more about Mezzana, because Roar has now spotted the implant that Gwen was working on to replace her hand, pretty much since the first time they met. And now they're contemplating whether she could install it for Roar as well. But Gwen is worried because... Or if Gwen dared to tempt fate and intervene, would Roar fall into deep sleep just like Mezzana, never to awaken again? Mezzana has only been unconscious for like 1 day. Calm down, this is not the same as never, and you don't know what her condition really is yet. But Gwen is already in full drama territory. If I touch your implant, you might never wake up again. I mean, if you cause a short circuit, then yeah, that might well be, but I'm not sure Roar's completely smashed hand that will automatically mean she won't make it through the next competition is that much better, so... And Gwen once again has amazing eyesight. She can study Roar's hand, but at the same time notice that Roar is looking around the room and is spotting the implant. Gwen tried to prepare for her. And this, for me, is the best part of this. In the center of the wardrobe, easily viewable from Gwen's bed, was the cyborg hand she had been tinkering with for weeks, creating nearly from scratch. Gwen would make such a shit spy. She's not supposed to have these parts. She's not supposed to make implants for any cyborgs because they're all supposed to finish their contract with the first implant they get. Yet Gwen doesn't bother putting anything away. The fact that anybody who can walk into the room can see what's happening is like, yeah, wow. Slow clap for Gwen and keeping secrets so well. We get a bit more redundant information because Gwen tells you again about the cyber prohibition law and how it forbids you from manufacturing implants. We've heard this at least twice before this point, so you really didn't need to point this out to inform the reader or Roar. Well, okay, this is just for the reader. To inform the reader that this was a difficult task and it's against the law. We already know. So they talk for a bit more and then ultimately decide that Roar wants to risk this, so Gwen starts operating on her. And while she's disinfecting her equipment, she wishes Bastion was there. Not to comfort her, no, just because he's so helpful during surgeries. And it's like, really, this is the moment where you go, oh, I wish the guy was here. Then I'm not quite sure about this last sentence either. There was only one competition left before they saw the Emperor. I mean, they and as the performers, because I don't see why Gwen would think that she will go as well. She's not part of the act, so I'm not sure they will take the Tinkerer with them. Or maybe they will just take everybody because in the end all cyborgs should be dead. Because that's kind of what I see coming here. Although, again, it seems like a very elaborate and unnecessarily difficult way to kill off your cyborgs if they all live in your castle and you have keys to every single room. But, yeah. We'll find out soon enough. Well, okay, I'm only halfway through the book, so maybe not soon enough, but, you know, someday soon. In chapter 21, we're back in Rora's head, and although this is only a couple of pages long, this is literally 2.5 pages. Yeah, okay, more like 2, if you include the spacing. But I have a lot to say about this, because, damn. So Rora wakes up in Gwen's bed, because she's in pain. Well, I mean, you know, fixing a new implant clearly takes it out of you. No wonder. But she sees Gwen sleeping on the floor next to the bed, and her cheeks heated as she spotted Gwen curled up on the floor with several throw pillows and a quilt blanket. This seems like a very weird reaction for a woman who regularly attends orgies. It's like, oh my god, there's a person sleeping next to the bed. Ooh, blush. Seems unfitting for her somehow. I don't know. I'm also not sure how Rora's brain works. Against all odds, Rora had successfully seduced Gwen, manipulating her to break circus rules and create a refurbished hand. I would not describe the situation like that. She thought about seducing Gwen, didn't really do much to achieve that, then refused to talk to her for a week, so Gwen had to force her way back into Rora's vicinity or whatever. And I don't know, I would not describe this whole thing as a seduction of any kind. And I get the feeling that Rora really likes drama as well. The woman who'd risk everything for her time and again. Twice. Gwen risked stuff for you twice so far. She gave you a new implant, and she came after you to save you from a dragon. Or to help you in the second competition. I mean, those are big gestures, don't get me wrong, but they still don't deserve time and again, I don't think. And then there seems to be an issue with consistency. Pain zigzagged up her arm from the movement. Installing machinery into bone and sinew was never easy, particularly without anesthesia, but she had made it through. Yeah, but we were told that you can't have anesthesia when you install implants anyway, because it messes with the nervous system or with the installation or whatever. So how is this more difficult, particularly without anesthesia, if you can't use it anyway? I'm just confused at this point. And I found a word that the author really likes because it came up with Gwen beforehand, and that I'm starting to detest. Starting a sentence with interestingly. No, whatever you're saying after is likely not interesting to me. Same goes for the disappointment swirling through Rora. Rora is torn between staying with Gwen for the night, or I don't know whether she wants to curl up on the floor with Gwen or not, or, you know. She's torn whether she should stay in the room or whether she should take off. But Rora chooses to take off, but she takes a spare quill and parchment to leave Gwen a note. And I'm just like, so your writing is like medieval as well? Or Gwen is really into calligraphy in her free time, but I don't think so. So just like paper and pen was not a thing, or is not a thing, in the age of space travel, we are going back to quills and parchment. I'm really confused about the world building, like what works, what doesn't work, what has been invented, what hasn't, because the medieval fantasy setting that includes the dragon and this and the healer really just clashes with the idea of spaceships for me. But since Rora has to hide her new implant, she nicks one of Gwen's large sleeping shirts to hide her new implant. I'm just like, how long are the sleeves on this shirt that you can hide like your whole lower arm and hand? I don't think I own anything that has long enough sleeves to do this. I think even if I nicked one of my boyfriend's hoodies, that wouldn't be long enough to achieve that. Unless Gwen somehow managed to make at least the lower part of the implant look very much like the old one, but I don't think so. In chapter 22 we're back with a very disappointed Gwen because she woke up alone. damn, Gwen doesn't like waking up alone, I guess. Gwen sits at breakfast with Bastion and the healer, who finally gets a name. Barbosa Brower. Okay, I guess he's a bit more important than I gave him credit for because he now has a name. And Gwen looks over to Rora. Sensing her gaze, Rora looked up and their eyes locked. She flashed a set of perfect square teeth. Teeth are square? Like mine certainly aren't, but you know, I wouldn't use my teeth as the standard anyway, so. But square? That seems like Rora has incredibly short teeth. I don't think I complained about this in Gwen's last chapter, but she keeps telling you that she's falling for Rora now. And she tells you again here, and I think this is like the third time I've been reading this in like 3 chapters or so, and I'm just like, stop telling me about this, please. I get it, you're into Rora. We all get it. Let's move on. Bastion and Gwen have a bit of a conversation, or I would call it forced flirting more like, because Gwen says she couldn't sleep and Bastion asks couldn't or wouldn't. Swallowing a gulp of the loathsome brew. I don't know, apparently their coffee tastes like stew as well, which sounds really disgusting. Gwen forced a smile. Why so curious? Does the great Bastion Kabir want to give me a reason to stay up late? Ugh. Can we not? Like, you literally just told us that you're falling for Robin. I mean, okay, she might be polyamorous as well, so that's fine. But can you maybe establish one relationship and figure out how this is gonna go, or what the boundaries for the people involved are before you throw yourself at Bastion again? Because Bastion also tells you that he's not into the polyamorous thing. He prefers his women to sleep only with him. I sincerely hope that Brower, the healer, has more significance further down the line, because if he only got a name and he got only mentioned for the following scene, then I am not impressed. So Gwen and Bastion had this weird flirting moment while the guy was just sitting next to them eating. And Gwen addresses him at some point, and apparently he's studying his bowl as though performing surgery, to ask about Mizana. And apparently she just caught the guy masturbating, like in the mess hall, while sitting next to Bastion and her. And at first I was like, I'm reading into this. But no, he is masturbating while sitting next to Bastion and Gwen. I'm just like, I didn't need this. I didn't need this scene to happen at all. I don't know whether it's just there for shock value or whatever, but it does not add anything to anything. And just no. And if this guy was really so much into watching, then why doesn't he just accompany like Mizana and Akio and whoever to all of those orgies and watches there or whatever? But really, in this situation, ugh. Celeste turns back up to talk about the next competition, and once again the watchmen are blocking the exit so nobody can run away. I'm just like, well, where would these people run to? Like, they've just been to a competition where they had climbing gear and rations or whatever and were let outside the castle, so at least the performers who participated in the second competition could have fucked off into the wilderness at least. That seems like the better option compared to what is happening here, but none of them did. So clearly the outside world is harsh enough or dangerous enough for people to consider this the better option. So where would they run now that Celeste is making an announcement? Doesn't seem very logical to me. Also, the level of security is really confusing. You need watchmen so people who have like spoons and forks from breakfast don't attack you or try to run off. But then a couple of chapters back, Gwen visited Celeste's office and she was fully armed. She had like a gun and at least 2 knives on her or something, and that was fine. But God forbid Celeste makes an announcement without watchmen blocking every single door. And just because I noticed this while Gwen is having a bit of a panic attack and flashbacks from the last surgery. Another performer, a woman, had reached for her, desperately begging for mercy before she pissed herself. Again with this pissing and shitting themselves, like, I'm sorry to say, but I think the author likes this imagery or whatever way too much. You know, if you have like one instance in a book this size, like, okay, if you wanted to make a point or, you know. But I feel like this comes up way too often. Now, obviously, I don't know how PTSD works really and how flashbacks work, but if Celeste talking about the next competition triggers a flashback for Gwen, how is she okay sitting at a breakfast table with the guy who assists her in all of those gruesome surgeries and flirting with him? Wouldn't Bastion be a potential trigger for her as well? If looking at the guy, makes you remember those surgeries, because that's what he did after their first set of surgeries, where she was really upset with him and could barely look at him. But now it's fine because we're busy flirting. The third part of the competition is actually putting up an act, doing a performance for a crowd. They are going to some outlaw planet for that, which is full of pirates and whatnot, and has no Fed or police supervision whatsoever, it seems. And the pirates, etc., get to vote on which 10 performers get to go and see the Emperor. And Gwen has this thought about it. What was the mistress thinking? Their ships would be robbed within moments of docking, if not shot down before and sold for scrap. And why would this be a proper test of skill for the Emperor? Well, why would competition 1 or 2 be a proper test of skill for a performer? Because depending on what kind of act you put up, like what good would any magician do in the first competition? What does capturing a dragon have to do with anything for a circus act? I mean, outside of the guy who works with like lions and whatnot, that makes a hint of sense, but for everybody else? And apparently everybody who does not get voted to go to the Emperor gets to stay behind on Jinx as humans. So Gwen is instantly like, oh god, I have to do more surgeries. And besides worrying about herself, Gwen is also very worried about Roar. More than the threat to Gwen's cyborg eye or physical well-being was the threat to Roar. Bastion had known about their nights together. Could the show management team know as well? Would they punish Roar or her friends for Gwen's non-compliance? Would the mistress dirty her hands and butcher the losing performers for their parts? Like, sometimes the book is trying to tell you that Gwen is generally an intelligent woman because, she figures out all of this tinkering and all of this surgical stuff more or less by herself, because the mistress sure as hell isn't helping much. So, generally speaking, she should be an intelligent woman, but this section really makes me question her brain power. Like, Bastion had known about their nights together, yeah, but so did like virtually everybody else. You constantly have watchmen outside your door that watched you go into Rora's room, that saw Rora come out of your room or go into your room or whatever. It's like, aside from the fact that you were anything but subtle about flirting with each other, watchmen have seen you visit each other, so Celeste knows, or if Celeste cares to know, she knows. And you don't need Bastion to rat you out for that. And then the last part is about Gwen not being certain that she can do more surgeries. She's not certain she has it in her. Like, would the mistress dirty her hands? You mean as in, would she dirty her hands more? Because there's plenty of blood on those hands already. And would she butcher the losing performers? Yes, she would. And I feel like she would just take an axe and hack limbs off instead of doing surgical removal or anything. But yeah. I don't know. You know what the mistress is capable of already. I don't know why you're questioning this, Gwen. Well, Gwen is having her panic attack and Bastion is trying to help, so he switches sides from where he's sitting and holds her hand and tells her to breathe. Which is peculiar because a little bit later they are more or less arguing. Gwen tells Bastion that she is not certain she can do any more surgeries, and he seems very cold about it. It's like the polar opposite to what he just showed in the mess hall while holding her hand. For a moment he studied her. What if it's Rora? What if she loses and either you could remove her hand properly or she could die from blood loss? Don't you dare. As the Tinkerer you have a job to perform at the circus. Yeah, now Gwen is a bit confused because any warmth that had developed between them was gone. Yes, but like he was literally warm towards you 10 minutes, at best 10 minutes before this conversation, so that is some wild flipping of behavior we get there from Bastion. But I found another sentence that supports my theory that the Watchmen are actually robots, not even cyborgs, but straight up robots, because it was as though they'd become mindless statues, some are worse than before. Because they didn't acknowledge any of the cyborgs walking past, and I was like, well, maybe, they might not be human either. I don't know. They never get much of a description, so they might be in full uniform or not. I can't tell. But I feel like they don't behave entirely human in some of the descriptions you get. Gwen makes a decision not to give up, and she comes up with a plan, like on the spot, and she asks Bastian to join her in her room that night so she can lay out a plan. I hope she figures out the details of said plan in the meantime, because right now I don't think she has any of those. And Roa proves that she's about as smart as Gwen sometimes. No, Roa said, her voice rising. If anyone is to blame, it's the mistress. She's the reason for these competitions happening. Releasing a series of hacking cuffs, Gwen jerked her human eye toward where the Watchmen stood guard around the theater, hoping Roa and Arcu understood. Now, if Roa and Arcu haven't picked up on the fact that the Watchmen are not their friends, then there is really no helping these guys. So Gwen asks those two to join her in her room as well. And then I suppose in the next chapter we'll get to hear about the plan, and soon after we will find out just how wrong it will go. Because there's no way that a plan that Gwen just came up with on the spot will lead to success. And more importantly, what happened to the dragon? We don't know yet, and I fear for the poor animal. I fear for him. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope I can cut this down to a decent length and it's not gonna be ages to watch. Like and subscribe if you want to help the channel out. Let me know in the comments whether you've read the book and what you make of it. Bye guys!